through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Miss Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malawu-Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Miss Crawford, Miss Daly, Miss Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Clark.
Members, I want to welcome everyone joining us this evening online via YouTube, JBC TV, all the video links, and you, the members of Parliament, and also persons who have joined us in the gallery this evening. I feel sure that most of our guests in the gallery are here to listen to their representative as we continue the constituency debates. We welcome you all and trust you will have a good evening, an informative evening that pleases us all. Statements by ministers. Statements by ministers. Are there any? House Leader? Not. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today is a copy of the Auditor General's Department Certified Appropriation Account, Head 20,011, Accountant General's Department for the year 2019-2020.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally,
Madam Speaker, utilizing Standing Order 26A, I had a motion that I had forwarded to the House Leader and the Minister involved. But then I received a letter, a very gracious letter, quite respectful, seeking my cooperation. And being a team player, you know that I would have. And I also had consultation with the Honourable Minister, because there was a rumor that some persons would have resigned if the resolution was even taken. The Minister assures me that that is fake news. And I take the Minister's word, and he also assures me that he will be doing some consultations and would get back to you shortly. Having consulted with my constituency, what asked me to bring it, based on the letter, I will oblige and will hold waiting on the Minister, because we are all one team and we have to support each other. Thank you, ma'am.
I thank you very much, Member. Questions and answers to questions?
Madam Speaker, at the expiration of 21 days, I intend to ask the Minister of Finance the questions in my name.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, Madam Speaker, I would like to indicate that the State of Constituency debate will continue.
The leader is on her feet and you can speak to each other, but surely we should be able to hear the House leader speak. Please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. So at this time, Madam Speaker, the State of Constituency debate will continue with contributions from the Honourable Favour Williams, MP St Andrew Eastern, followed by Mr. Dave Brown, Member of Parliament, Hanover Eastern, and Ms. Tova Hamilton, Member of Parliament, Trelawney Northern. Madam Speaker, I now ask that Standing Orders 32C(3) be suspended to enable the members making their contributions during the debate on this motion to continue their speeches for 30 minutes, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches.
Member of Parliament for St Andrew Eastern, Minister Williams. Just before you begin, in anxiety to hear all that's going to happen and is happening in education, the question before the House is that we approve the motion for the continuation of the constituency debate. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am thankful for the opportunity to be able to make a presentation on the state of the constituency of St Andrew Eastern. Madam Speaker, this would not have been possible were it not for their votes and the confidence reposed in me. But I do not stand alone. My husband, Leo Williams, and our two daughters are always there to offer me support. My family, who don't miss a beat on anything that happens in Jamaica, have been my loudest cheerleaders. I thank them for the energy they give. The constituency executive, the supervisors, the indoor agents, the runners, the drivers, the council of the Mona Division, Andrew Bellamy, the caretaker council of the Papine Division, George Planto, and the many stakeholders in and outside of the constituency who give up their time and energies to maintain the spirit from one election to the next, I say thank you. My silent but very effective close protection officers, I thank you for your dedication and service. The hours are long, well beyond what you sign on for, but you do the work with grace and dignity. I take inspiration from my colleague MPs. We give up our best in our constituencies to ensure families, individuals, communities move forward on a number of different fronts, be it housing, infrastructure development, education, entrepreneurship, sports, safety and security, health. The goal is to provide as much as we can with the resources we're given, and then some. Madam Speaker, I have been serving St. Andrew Eastern since 2014, more than a full 2 years prior to the 2016 election. Well before it was publicly declared that I would be the caretaker candidate, I oftentimes accompanied the then former MP Bartlett into communities. I recall my very first visit to an inner city community in St. Andrew Eastern, in which a man had beheaded his living lady friend in the wee hours of the night. I still recall vividly, many years later, the flood of emotions that coursed through me and the absolute shock of the moment. I asked then, and even now in quiet moments, when that inhumane act flashes in my mind, as it does many times since, I ask again and again, didn't anyone hear anything? Wasn't there even one person who could come to the rescue of this woman? Madam Speaker, in that moment, as I stared at the helplessness of the situation, I felt a passion to help empower persons to make better choices for themselves and not be trapped in poverty in their personal lives or by the conditions of a community in which they find themselves. My focus, Madam Speaker, has been on helping to improve lives, build community infrastructure, and advocate for safety and security, especially within vulnerable communities. Madam Speaker, St. Andrew Eastern has at least 27 communities and many sub-communities within those major ones. The range of infrastructure development varies from the gated community of Long Mountain Country Club to the unstructured Mona Common. And so when I speak of community infrastructure development, I speak of roads and sidewalks, water and sewage infrastructure, electricity, access to internet, green spaces and parks, community centers, and proper housing. Madam Speaker, for any community to be considered fully functional, these are the minimum requirements. The common requests across the inner city communities are the need for housing or help with building materials so persons can improve their living conditions. Through the Constituency Development Fund, I have maximized on the allowable amounts for housing every year, helping at least 100 persons annually with housing grants. The Prime Minister's new social housing initiative has given new hopes to those men and women who, no matter how hard they work, will not be able to attain proper housing. Many of them were born in a time when access to high school was reserved for a few, and so education beyond primary school was not in their future. It may be impossible for them to catch up despite their best efforts, but they too deserve proper housing, even as they make the investments in their children and grandchildren's education so that they can have a better life. Madam Speaker, social housing gives hope and restores dignity. St. Andrew Eastern has been the beneficiary. We thank you, Prime Minister. Even if it's one Dega house, it is a mansion for some families. Continue to hand over keys, Prime Minister. We will be there with you. Beyond the help from the social housing component of the Constituency Development Fund, many community members continue to sacrifice to build their homes. So, for example, Backbush, the largest of the inner city communities, has had visible improvements in housing, and I want to commend the residents. You did significant construction during COVID-19. Madam Speaker, my role is to do those things in the Backbush community that community members cannot necessarily do for themselves. And so early during my first term, I focused on roads, ensured the community center was refurbished and outfitted with laptops, and that the center had Wi-Fi. Pre-COVID robust training classes happened with persons getting first-level certificates for the BPO sector. I am now looking to activate training again so more community members can find gainful employment. I will be partnering with Excelsior as schools reopen again. I'm also continuing to take down the zinc fences, the most recent being those on the front near the community center. I want to focus on the lanes next, take down those zinc fences in those lanes and replace them with proper concrete walls and create proper walkways for residents. In the meantime, after much perseverance, we will be addressing the plight of 12 families that live in a building that was built to be a community center. But over the decades, it got converted into living spaces that require a lot of work to make it safe. We did the survey of households, and it is going through the process. I was told today that we received permission to build from 2 of the agencies with responsibility, and now the project is on its way to get other approvals to go to design. Over the years, Madam Speaker, I've advocated for, and the community has received, regularized, expanded water supply into many homes. We're working to regularize electricity in Backbush and have taken steps to help persons with house wiring. Madam Speaker, since entering representational politics, I've had a focus on parks, green spaces, functioning community centers as go-to locations, and play areas for communities. I'm particularly pleased that over my tenure as Member of Parliament, I've been able to bring on stakeholders such as CMEX to enhance the parks in communities such as Hope Pastures and Mona Heights with walking tracks and other infrastructure work. Most recently, we engaged with the community of Blue Castle to improve the functionality of Aurelia Park to bring it to the same level as that of the major park in Mona Heights. Ideas abound regarding what that green space can become. So far, we've rescued it from the cow grass, leveled it, worked with the church, a major stakeholder in the community, to fence the park, to keep out stray animals, and prevent it from becoming a bus terminus and a taxi stand. Lots of work still remain ahead, but I'm committed to continuing working with residents to see the development of Aurelia Park. Madam Speaker, it is not just the middle-class communities for which I desire parks and green spaces and community centers. I have the same desire for our inner-city communities. Tavern Community Center was completely redone in the early days of me being Member of Parliament. The plan was to start having hospitality training, but COVID hit and the center was closed. Now that we're crawling out from under the COVID cloud, those ideas will be reactivated again. I will work to get the furniture back in the space and get a thriving training program in hospitality going. Madam Speaker, I'm also pleased that the USF, an entity of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, installed Wi-Fi in the community of Tavern to help residents gain access to the internet. We must continue to take action to reduce the barriers to access to technology and the internet. In Chambers Lane, we have started the beautification of a park for that community. Thank you, ATL Automotive, and your Green Drive initiative for starting us off with palm trees and other plants. Chambers Lane was also the focus of significant work to take down zinc fence and replace with proper walls. Every time I come down or I pass the foot of Beverly Hills onto Monroe Road and I look across the Chambers Lane, I feel a sense of having accomplished something for the residents of Chambers Lane. With colleges starting for face-to-face again, and there's demand for student housing, I know that the environs in Chambers Lane are more attractive than in times past. Absolutely. In Augusttown, Hermitage, African Gardens, and Goldsmith Villa, significant investment is expected to create 6 spaces for residents to engage in recreational and other activities, as well as improve the community's general environment and aesthetics. The project will benefit approximately 10,920 residents of the Augusttown, Hermitage, African Garden, and Goldsmith Villa communities, and will cost approximately $10 million. This is monumental and represents the continuing build phase of the ZOZO that is being implemented by JISTV, an entity of government that has been conscientious in these various projects. The design will include small parks, gardens, roadside greenery, and vegetation barriers. Fencing will also be installed at selected spaces, and the scope is outlined in my presentation. In Augusttown, major road construction has been done and water infrastructure expanded under the build phase of the ZOZO. Again, the build phase started in earnest in February of this year, and the total amount that has been spent over the time is about $202 million to rehabilitate roadways, put in the associated drain channels, and installation of approximately 1.365 kilometers of water lines and laterals in African Gardens. In Goldsmith Villa, we've had similar things in terms of roads and installation of water lines and laterals. Madam Speaker, on the vexed issue of regularization of electricity, I am pleased to note that there are many communities in St. Andrew Eastern asking to be regularized for electricity. Unfortunately, the cost of house wiring is out of the reach for many. Over the years, through JISTV and CDF, we've been able to assist several communities and encouraged prepaid electricity as a way to manage electricity usage. I'm quite willing and have demonstrated that we can regularize communities in a way that ensures everyone is in the conversation. And I want to call on JPS to prioritize those communities that have been asking to be regularized. And I want to assure, thank you, the community of Fallen in Tavern that I am committed to ensure that the infrastructure that was installed for electricity, for which the work has stopped, that will restart and be completed. I want the communities in St. Andrew Eastern to embrace the notion of paying for electricity, water, and other amenities, and many of those community members do already. Madam Speaker, in our middle-class communities, the focus of the residents is on ensuring their community roads remain in good condition, that there's consistent electricity, that street lights work, that garbage collection happens on the days promised, and that bushing happens with some regularity. Our middle-class communities struggle with illegal taxi stands in their communities, stray animals, for example, cows in Mona Heights, and the real issue of the rapid changes in the character of their communities from one of being single-family homes with quiet and solitude to the multiple construction of high-rise buildings, bringing with them more traffic, more noise, impact on water structure, and so on. Prior to COVID, we had many community meetings with the various GOJ entities responsible for the approval processes for building. These meetings went into abeyance during COVID-19. However, we will be getting back to having these meetings so community members are aware of the plans of the town planners and are able to have real conversations and speak to issues of concern to them. At the end of the day, the high-rise may still be built. However, everyone will be better off if all the stakeholders are allowed a voice. In Standpipe, the major issue for that community is the need to regularize land titles. And this is something I have been engaging the respective government entities on from day one. There has been some movements in terms of visits to the community, Assessment of the lands, measurements taken, public notices have been issued, and we wait the outcome. I note the impatience of many community members. I too am impatient for a breakthrough on this issue. The community of Highlight View suffers from constant flooding due to its location on the mountainside above Papine. The soil type is shale and is subject to shifts. We generally respond as best as we can to help the community clean up after the floods. The big problem for Highlight View is proper housing. We have to help, but we also have to be mindful of the vulnerability of the current area. Yes. Madam Speaker, many in St. Andrew Eastern are already entrepreneurs, waking up early to create a life for themselves and their families. In recent months, there has been a particular attention and effort on helping persons in the Zozo areas to formalize and expand their businesses. We know, Madam Speaker, that it is the persons who create new products and services that help to stimulate new employment. This year, about 60 persons have been trained and given grants to expand their existing business. The businesses are growing, and we commend all those who applied, were interviewed, received the grants, and have put their shoulders to the wheel to grow their business. Yes. Recently, as recent as last month, we hosted a session on entrepreneurship in Hermitage to include other communities. 4 very successful entrepreneurs, one of whom has a company listed on the junior market, were present. Madam Speaker, three of these successful entrepreneurs are from the inner city communities of Hermitage, Augustown, and Kintyre. We had Ricardo Allen, President and CEO of an education technology company named One-on-One Educational Services Limited. Ricardo lived in Hermitage. We also had Tyrone Wilson, President and CEO of iCreate. Tyrone lived in Kintyre, a neighboring community in East Rural St. Andrew. And Keisha Bailey, CEO of Profit Jumpstarter, is from Augustown. They spoke to a packed audience about their journey. Beyond that, they had tangible advice, strategies, and employment opportunities for community members. Many community members embraced the event and were amazed that their own came back to lend their experiences and expertise. And I will continue to do more of this, Madam Speaker. Yes. Madam Speaker, St. Andrew Eastern has more than it has been able to harness. The vast UWI, UTech, and other educational institutions provide ample opportunities for communities to have a thriving student housing ecosystem. Many communities are facilitating this economic activity and earning. However, others have not been able to take advantage of it due to violence in their communities. We continue to work to reduce the incidence of shootings and crime so that communities can enjoy peace and begin to build economically. The student housing opportunity is large. Madam Speaker, the farmers in Land Leases Higher Heights group are amazing in their production of produce from the mountainside overlooking the Hope Botanical Gardens. So too are the farmers in African Gardens, producing a variety of ground provisions, jams and jellies, wines and tonics. Each year on Independence Morning, the African Garden farmers do their annual event, not only by bringing out their items, but they're also the keepers of the cultural songs and dances. Augustown and its environs are richer for the existence of these group of farmers and other members of the African Gardens community. On education and training, Madam Speaker, I recall the first resume writing session that I had and the eager private sector persons who did not hesitate to come on board to help our young people. Many community members got jobs out of those sessions and are on their way to success. We have not taken our eyes off employment and training. And as I walk in many inner city communities now, today, this week, there are far less persons sitting on the corners, as many are gainfully employed. Over the past year, again in the Zozo communities, about 200 persons were trained in several different phases to be environmental wardens, to patrol their communities, and in turn to train persons on how to properly dispose of their waste. A clean community fosters pride, and we're seeing that in these communities. Madam Speaker, annually, I maximize on the education component of the Constituency Development Fund to help parents offset the high costs of books and other back-to-school supplies. I also endeavor to give an allocation to tertiary students. This year, a total of approximately $5 million were distributed in the form of book vouchers to many parents across St. Andrew Eastern. Education of our population needs to be seen as the single most important activity our children should pursue. Imagine, Madam Speaker, if all our citizens were college graduates. Yes. What a different society we would have. Education and training enhance the labor force. We know that 3 in every 5 persons employed across Jamaica have not received any training. So then, let us allow ourselves to imagine and then take the action to get our young people into institutions of higher learning. Madam Speaker, sports represent that activity that brings people together, suspend animosity and grievances even for the duration of the event. All the communities in St. Andrew Eastern have organized sporting activities that I support as best as I can. Yes. Last year, together with the community of Backbush, we worked to restore a multi-purpose field so that 6-a-side games could be played, bringing wholesome activities to the community of Backbush. These facilities are also used commercially, thus allowing sustainability. I have 2 functioning football clubs in St. Andrew Eastern, and they are members of CASAFA. There is the Augustown Football Club, as well as the Mountain View Football Club. And, Madam Speaker, I also happen to be the chairwoman of both of them. I have to tell you, Madam Speaker, it is a very expensive position. In the neighboring community of Jarrett Lane, sports is a real draw for the many young people, and their annual sports day is a feature. I am pleased that only recently, in the last couple of months, we refurbished their netball court and the outdoor restroom. There's more to be done with their football field to have it fenced, the community center refurbished, and the general road, light, and water infrastructure. But we're working with communities. And I'm also pleased to say that Standpipe has a fully functioning multi-purpose court, which was designed and built by the coming together of the St. Margaret's Church, the U.S. Embassy, private sector entities, especially the Musons Group, and the community. And I want to publicly thank all the stakeholders. I know it wasn't easy doing the work. It went on for a while, but in the end, we persevered, and that community has a beautiful, high-quality court called the Turf. It serves as a go-to location for many sports events and community activities. Standpipe itself as well has Wi-Fi within it in our continued effort to reduce the digital divide. Underway currently, Madam Speaker, and when this is completed, I'll be immensely happy, are efforts to create a bike track for young people, yes, to hone their skills on their bikes in a safe area near Judgment Yard in Augustown rather than practice on the busy streets, endangering others. Still early days, Madam Speaker. However, it has great prospects for our young persons as an attraction. For the communities, and I'm sure I'm not leaving out any community, but I'll just mention quickly, Highlight View, Land Lease, Ellison Flats, Bottom Tavern, Premix, and Cheshire Village. Sports is also immensely popular, although the invoices for trophies for the games and the prizes tend to be large amounts. I'm always committed to seeing our best to provide these incentives and prizes for the games. I have sat through many games on a Sunday afternoon, Madam Speaker. Regarding safety and security, I see where many residents have become members of WhatsApp groups and are looking out and reporting any strange cars or suspicious strangers in their communities. And they are to be commended for getting together as a group on the ground to help to protect themselves and each other. In most of these WhatsApp groups, members of the JCF are present and they're able to respond to issues in real time. Our community members greatly appreciate this initiative on the part of the JCF. I know that policing is tough work in Jamaica, and members of the JCF are never thanked enough for putting themselves on the line. And so I want to say thank you to the JCF, particularly to Matilda's Corner Police, Augustown Police, Mountain View Police, and the post on the UWI campus for your diligence and responsiveness. Madam Speaker, as I close, St. Andrew Eastern has many assets. Some are historical and others created. Think UWI, think UTEC, think the Mona Reservoir, which is being converted. I just went with the Prime Minister. Yes. Today, and Minister Matthew Samuda, Minister Vaz, to the launch of the conversion of the Mona Reservoir from simply being a storage place for water to also produce electricity. All right? It is happening in St. Andrew Eastern. And I know, I said when I stood up to give my remarks that the Mona Reservoir is one of the 7 wonders of St. Andrew Eastern. And if you think I'm joking, think the aqueduct, think the Great House, think the Hope Gardens Botanical Gardens, think Hope Zoo, think UWI, think UTEC, and the Mona Reservoir. Yes. St. Andrew Eastern has highly regarded primary and secondary schools. In addition to all of that, St. Andrew Eastern serves the largest community of persons with disabilities, caring for their many needs and encouraging inclusivity in our schools and on the playgrounds. The repository of knowledge in St. Andrew Eastern is vast. The gold in St. Andrew Eastern is its people, vibrant and hardworking. I wish I could engage more of our mature persons, or 40-year-olds, or 50-year-olds, or 60-year-olds, to think again about their educational opportunities. Madam Speaker, I won't give up. Someday I will have a breakthrough. St. Andrew Eastern is blessed. Amen. I have been delivering since 2014. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very good, Wonderful.
Some bad man rising from the other side. Good. Philip, you wish you could have migrated, not you?
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the member and the minister for her presentation. And I now ask you to invite Mr. Dave Brown the Member of Parliament for Hanover Eastern to make his presentation.
I thank the member from St. Andrew Eastern for her presentation, and I now call on the Member of Parliament from Hanover Eastern to make his presentation.
Madam Speaker, may I have your permission to speak from a seat as is not my own?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Nice season.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Madam Speaker, my colleague, members of Parliament, Madam Speaker, my colleague members of Parliament on this side and across the aisle, I stand here today very aware of God's grace, His mercies, and His unending love. Madam Speaker, we have experienced a lot over the last 2 years, but amidst it all, we are resilient and made it through one of the most difficult times in our recent history. Yes. Madam Speaker, indeed, as a country, we have a lot to be thankful for. Yes. Those of us who are called to serve do not get to pick and choose the circumstances under which we serve. We have to take the good with the bad. Yes. I am encouraged that as a government, with the many demands of this unprecedented period, we remain committed to the vision and continue to serve our country well. Madam Speaker, on the point of service, I want to thank the Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, for his steady leadership and his service to this country, especially during a time that was remarkably difficult. Madam Speaker, everyone here would have noticed that the backbench is a strong and dynamic. And I must say, to the strong and dynamic backbench, thank you for your support. I thank the team of persons in Hanover Eastern who continue to work for the good of the constituents. Councillors Brown and the Parish, Councillor Caretaker Brown, Mrs. Miles Campbell, the executive of the constituency, workers, thank you for your support. I thank the constituents of Hanover Eastern for their continued faith in my abilities and for accepting nothing less than the best representation. Madam Speaker, there's hardly any success without the love and support of family. So I thank my 3 children, especially my firstborn, my son who continues to hold my businesses together. So that I can devote this time to service. Madam Speaker, service must not be taken lightly. No. Service gives you purpose. And as my lady says to me all the time, Dave, purpose over work for us. Yeah. It is not just work. We are living our purpose as we are doing God's work. So in this moment, I want to thank her for all that she is, and thank her for her words of wisdom and encouragement, and for pushing my growth, both personally and professionally. As a second-term member of Parliament for Hanover Eastern, I feel the weight of service. The demands are great, but I remain grateful to have been selected to be the person to serve the people of my constituency at this time. Yes. Service, Madam Speaker, is not self-promoting. Service is not dishonest, nor is it misleading. Service to others, for in doing so, we serve God. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is my honor to present to this House the status report of the constituency of Hanover Eastern. Madam Speaker, I'll begin with a report on road rehabilitation work. Madam Speaker, the last time I presented, I was candid about the procurement process that delayed the start of road projects in some key areas. Madam Speaker, the people were impatient with me, and rightly so. Today, I am happy to report that the phased rehabilitation work for roads leading from Opel to Cocoon Castle has begun. $60 million was spent to rehabilitate the road from Addington to Old School section of the road. We eagerly await the beginning of the second phase that is budgeted at a cost of $166 million. Madam Speaker, let it be noted that the procurement for this leg of the work is still underway. Madam Speaker, the project for the rehabilitation of the Chichester to Golden Grove Road has also begun, and another $60 million was spent on work from Chichester to Montego. The project, once completed, would have seen rehabilitation carried out from Montego to Oxenage Crossing, or Oxenage Feeder Road. Madam Speaker, lives are being positively impacted by improvements made under these two projects. The constituents are encouraged and are eager to see the completion of both of these tabled projects. Minister Warmington, I know you are keen on seeing the projects through to the end, and I thank you for the visits you made to the constituency to observe the progress of them. Madam Speaker, in addition to these projects, the Betheltown to Chester Castle Road was rehabilitated and completed at a cost of $28 million. The rehabilitation of this road has caused an ease to commuters, making it the journey from, well, I should say, making the journey more comfortable. People, it is seen as a shortcut from St. Elizabeth down into Montego Bay. I use it sometimes. You use it sometimes. Right. Madam Speaker, it has removed the anxiety commuters feel when traversing this section of the road. Madam Speaker, through the CDF and the Christmas program patching and overlaying were done in the areas of Tresor Castle, Arton Grove, Seaview, Barnes Lane, Bessie Baker, and Haddington. This was done to the tune of $16.5 million. Madam Speaker, while we work to ease the discomfort faced by commuters as a result of pothole roadway in some areas, I am concerned that lengthy delay in completing projects could reverse the work done. We have seen where small potholes quickly become craters as we wait on the procurement process. Madam Speaker, following the procurement guideline is very important. However, we wait, costs are going up, costing the country more money in the long run. Yes. I recall that the National Works Agency, through the force account, maintained the roads by ensuring patching was done on a quarterly basis. The reactivation of the force account would enable the regular maintenance of roads, saving the government from escalated costs, one of the results of a long procurement process for major works. I believe that procedure for accountability can be put in place to ensure that the force account is used according to guidelines. Madam Speaker, the stretch of roadway between Sheffield and Wakefield is in a wretched state. It is the worst piece of road from Montego Bay to Savlamar. This area used to benefit from the quarterly maintenance of roads through the force account. However, the roads has deteriorated steadily since 2020. Minister, I know you visited the area this year, and I'm making a plea for the start of the rehabilitation work as soon as possible. Madam Speaker, I want to highlight another issue related to roads. The town of Hopewell is heavily traversed. I am aware of the plans for a bypass. However, the congestion has worsened, and we are at a point where other solutions are needed until the bypass is constructed. Madam Speaker, it is my observation that the congestion is due to several factors. One factor is the indisciplined attitude of drivers who come into the town, as well as those who travel to other locations by way of the town. Drivers are impatient, and coupled with the buzz of movements of pedestrians, there is unbearable congestion. I have seen buses with tourists heading to Negril being stuck in the traffic in Hopewell for more than an hour. Imagine traveling for an hour by air. You're jet lagged. You go through the airport process, and finally you board a bus to your destination. However, 20 minutes into the journey, your bus stops and sits there for most of the time. This is tiring. We have to explore a short-term solution. Since 2016, I have lobbied for a stoplight to be erected to regulate the traffic. The build-up of traffic during peak hours is frustrating for the commuting public. Madam Speaker, an installed traffic light system would alleviate the problem. I call on the NAA to at least investigate whether this could be a viable option. Madam Speaker, I now turn the attention of the House to the matter of water supply and accessibility. Madam Speaker, the major water project for the Jericho Cascade water supply system was commissioned in 2020. The constituents from Claremont to Jericho continue to express gratitude as they have running water in their pipes. Excellent. The plan for phase 2 of the project that will give water supply to Retrieve, Patty Hill, Cash Hill, Hillaby, Smithfield, Georgia Road, Cascade, all the way through to Pondside, has had several technical delays. Although sanitization and flushing were carried out, the project have not moved beyond that point. I call on the Minister with responsibility to intervene, as the people have been without water in their pipes for decades. We have made great steps to get people this important commodity. Now let us see this through to the end. My understanding of the problem, Madam Speaker, is that there is an impasse between NWC and NAA. Whilst these two entities fail to resolve the issue, many lives are adversely affected. The NWC dug up the road to lay pipes. For years, the roads have remained unrepaired. As a result, the people are still without water. Yes, Madam Speaker, too often we hear of these problems between NWC and NAA. Yes. What prevents these two key government entities from sitting down, hammering out the issues, and find a solution that works? The people are waiting. They have been patient. What will it take to get the solution? Yes. Madam Speaker, as a government, we call on our people to behave with civility. We hear all the time that we want a kinder, gentler society. I agree, as a people, we have to change some things about who we are. However, Madam Speaker, these are vexing issues. It must be hard to see the road being dug up for years and the promise of water made, yet when you turn on the pipes, they are dry. Minister Samuda, and depending on you, you have to have this matter resolved soonest. In addition to that issue, Madam Speaker, the communities of Bambo and Old Pen are not on a proper water supply system. These communities are well populated with regulated water supplies only 2 days per week, and sometimes none. The demand of the Seaview pumping station is great, as it now serves Seaview, Lookout, Bambo, and a part of Old Pen. Madam Speaker, I use this opportunity to point out to the Minister that there needs to be a pumping station to serve Bambo and Old Pen. Water supply only 2 days per week is unacceptable, and sometimes none. Given the growing concern regarding sanitation and health, we must enable measures to ensure people get water in their pipes on a daily basis. Madam Speaker, it is clear the water holes in my constituency are many. I bring to this House the issue regarding the Shetland pumping station. Madam Speaker, the Shetland pumping station is in need of upgraded work. A new pumping station was installed recently. However, the old rusting pipe cannot withstand the water pressure. Some of these pipes were laid 3 feet deep almost 5 decades ago, making it a major project to retrieve and replace them. The recommendation, Madam Speaker, is for new surface pipes to be laid as a corrective measure and for long-term accessibility. Finally, on the issue of water, I believe there are issues that can be resolved, some immediately, some in the short term, with consistent effort. Madam Speaker, I will now report on the important issue related to farming and market restoration. Madam Speaker, the market in Hopewell was an eyesore and sore point for a long time. I am pleased to update the House that over $20 million was spent to upgrade and restore the Hopewell market. Madam Speaker, I must thank Minister Mackenzie for his interest in getting this done. The Minister made several visits to the constituency and ensured the space was upgraded to acceptable standards. The market was opened in June of this year. Minister Mackenzie, the people of Hanover Eastern, vendors and customers alike, say thanks. Now to farm roads. Madam Speaker, the maintenance of farm roads is important, not just to the agricultural sector, but also to our national development. Farmers must be given all the support as food is essential for our survival. Madam Speaker, the Nakalva Farm Road, one of the most important farm roads in Hanover East was upgraded at a cost of $16 million. The upgraded work has made both farmers and residents so happy that it has spurred interest in agriculture among my constituents. This has resulted in the unusual high requests of farming equipment, fertilizers, and seedlings. I extend thanks to the Ministry of Agriculture on behalf of the people. Imagine then, Madam Speaker, if we were to fix the roads in Temple, Castlehyde, and Georgia Road. Minister, these roads and other roads are in deplorable condition. Farmers are complaining that they are unable to get their produce to market, as their vehicles cannot handle the bad road conditions. Madam Speaker, we have all heard the concerns about food security. Our farmers need to be enabled by putting in the necessary infrastructure. Temple, Castlehyde, Georgia Road, and other farm roads should be the next immediate projects so that other farmers, or our farmers, can have better roads and make transportation of their products easier. It makes no sense to plant produce but cannot take the produce to the market. Yes. It makes even lesser sense to rehabilitate a market but produce are not there to sell. We have to complete the picture. Healthy produce, good farm roads, safety hygienic markets. Madam Speaker, I now move to update the House on housing and welfare. Through the social housing program, families continue to realize their dreams of owning a home. 5 houses were earmarked for as many families. 1 was completed and handed over, while 3 are in an advanced stage of construction. But, Madam Speaker, these 3 houses have been delayed. Their construction have been delayed in their construction due to the issue with the contractor. These houses have been stalled for 2 years with absolutely no additional work being done. I believe there has to be a swift attention to this to get matters resolved. Madam Speaker, my presentation this afternoon would be left wanting if I did not speak to the issue that have pervaded the national stage, they are education and crime. Madam Speaker, on the matter of education, 2 weeks ago I had a meeting with all the board chairmen in my constituency. I shared my perspective that were informed by published report on all the schools. Madam Speaker, schools such as Opal and Merlin High are of particular interest, given that these institutions have had issues remain in trouble. Madam Speaker, it is my belief that issues cannot be resolved by the schools alone. I use this opportunity to call upon the stakeholders in Hanover Eastern to play their part. Education, as I see it, is everybody's business. I have given the schools a charge to work with the community and parents in particular to resolve the issue in all the schools in Hanover Eastern. Madam Speaker, the teachers need our full support. They have so much to grapple with. And let us remember that schools are established to teaching and learning. Learning is not just for the subject as we know them. Learning is also intended to help our children develop civic pride and nationalism. Madam Speaker, I have been doing my best to support the schools, and I call on all constituents to play their part. Madam Speaker, we have not had a full system return face-to-face instruction since 2020. Parents and students alike were eager to get the preparation underway for the reopening of school. So in support of students return to school this September, $880,000 was spent to offset the cost of books, bags, and other necessities. $3.7 million was spent on book vouchers distribution through the CDF and the social support program. In addition, uniforms were purchased from the social support program for students who do not benefit from part. Madam Speaker, we ensure that support was given to the students at the tertiary level. $2.85 million was issued through grants to students to study at our two major universities, and those are teachers' colleges and community colleges. Madam Speaker, I want to also note the support in the area of technology in education. We have continued the issuing of tablets and other electronic devices to aid the learning process. Under the social support program, tablets and vouchers were issued. Madam Speaker, I am aware that device without connectivity will not aid over any useful results. We have been working closely with the Universal Service Fund to make provisions for connectivity to the internet. Only last week, Madam Speaker, through the USF, Sandy Bay Committee was given free Wi-Fi. Areas to include Opal and Montego are slated to be connected. The infrastructure is already in place for Opal, and so residents and people who will traverse the area will be connected very soon. Madam Speaker, I use this platform to reiterate my caution to students who will now have unlimited access to the internet. Students must remember to navigate the internet responsibly. The unlimited access to Wi-Fi is intended to help them in their development in academics and social being. However, I am aware of the predatory nature of some people. We do not want unlimited access resulting in children being lured to meeting strangers. Free access does not mean more access to antisocial online behaviors. We want our children educated so that they can grow and contribute positively to our society. Finally, Madam Speaker, I want to speak on the issue of crime. Hanover Eastern was reasonably considered a peaceful place to a large extent. However, over the last few months, I've been called to several situations that involve crime. A small committee called Pumpkin Bottom, for example, I've been plummeted into mourning. Pumpkin Bottom. Pumpkin. I've been plummeted into mourning due to a triple murder. The committees of Cascade and Cocoon Castle have also seen the darkness of murders resulting from gun crime. Those committees are double murders. Madam Speaker, I know by comparison to some areas, the figures are low. However, one murder anywhere is one murder too many. We should not be desensitized that we normalize these horrific acts of violence. Madam Speaker, I want to add my voice to the voices of well-thinking Jamaicans to say, crime is not just for the police to solve. There are still many upstanding people in the force who were my colleagues when I served. So yes, Mr. Biggerford, I served the JSTF. Your time would have been better spent sharing the expertise you learned during your tenure rather than you attempt to achieve political job. The men and women of the JSTF need our support. All Jamaicans, and specific to this presentation, the people of Hanover Eastern need to reject crime. By doing so, reject criminals. We will not reduce the figures significantly if we do not all stand together. The people of Hanover Eastern are humble and hardworking. We want our communities to be safe. Madam Speaker, as I close my presentation, I leave with all of you the thoughts of the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who said, "What you do today that is worthwhile inspires others to act at some future time." Members, let us remember that we are called to service. I know that the task sometimes feels a little bit uphill, but we must serve with humility so that our actions can be an inspiration to others. May God bless us all, and may God continue to bless our work.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am sure, Madam Speaker, that you are impressed with the presentation of our members of Parliament and the fact they have all kept within their allotted time. We really have to commend them for doing so. And so, Madam Speaker, at this time I ask you to invite Tova Hamilton, MP Trelawney North, to continue to make her presentation in this debate.
Thank the Parliament from Hanover Eastern for his presentation, and now I invite the Member of Parliament from Trelawney Northern to make her presentation.
Madam Speaker, permission to speak from a seat that is not my own. Thank you. Madam Speaker, it seems like just yesterday that we journeyed back in time to the 18th century to rediscover what was once the richest sugar area in Jamaica, which boasted one of the most vibrant towns and was home to one of the busiest ports on the North Coast. On this same journey, Madam Speaker, it was revealed to us that by the turn of the 20th century, life for residents of Trelawney began to change significantly. As we recall, it was the death of King Sugar that occasioned that change. A change that saw Trelawney become a shadow of itself, as the once bustling center of great wealth was replaced over time by a ghost town. Why is history so important? It may have been best articulated by the philosopher George Santayana when he said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it."
Hear, hear.
Madam Speaker, to study history is to study change.
Yes.
Because history gives us the tools to analyze and explain the problems in the past, it positions us to see patterns that might otherwise be invisible in the present, thus providing a crucial perspective for understanding and solving current and future problems. Madam Speaker, our past is filled with warning signs. We must be able to reflect on the events that built up to them, learn from mistakes made, and resist and question if we see similar patterns emerging. Consequently, if we commit to learning about our past, we can most certainly make better decisions about our future.
Those 18 years.
So what do we know about Trelawney Northern's past? Madam Speaker, on the last occasion, I documented some of the legacies I inherited on September 3, 2020, but time did not permit me to fully explore the gamut of issues that plague the constituency. Quite frankly, the 31 years of uninterrupted reign of my predecessors have only wasted precious time and left us healing many wounds. To continue this process of healing, today I will add to the list of things we know so we can make better decisions about our development.
Yes, right.
Madam Speaker, we know that Falmouth was one of the first areas on the island to enjoy piped water in 1799, and we had piped water before New York City. We know that the Martha Brae River has been the supply of potable water to residents in the parishes of St. Anne and the St. James for many years. And similarly, the Queen of Spain facility supplies St. James. We also know, despite these historical facts, that more than 25 communities in Trelawney Northern have been relying on trucked water because of an inconsistent or non-existent water supply, in some instances for more than 50 years. The residents of Bounty Hall can confirm this 50-year drought as factual. Speaking of Bounty Hall, Madam Speaker, there is yet another historical fact of grave importance that must be highlighted.
Please tell us.
It is a fact that the longest-serving member of Parliament for Trelawney Northern, the four-term veteran who has recently become quite the political commentator, is actually a native of Bounty Hall and currently still a resident. Madam Speaker, old folks would say, finger never say look here, him say look yonder. Once again, Madam Speaker, our past is filled with warning signs, and those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
And we don't want that.
Madam Speaker, when residents of communities such as Samuel Prospect, Bounty Hall, Sherwood, Bunkersville, and Calabar complained over the years, they complained bitterly. Not having access to potable water means not being able to take a proper shower, or cook, do laundry, the dishes, or even water your garden. And my rather considerate predecessors allowed this issue to continue unabated for decades. Madam Speaker, we never know the worth of water till the well is dry. If we should calculate the cost incurred by one low-income household to truck water over the past 10 years at a rate of $8,000 per 650-gallon tank, which requires refilling at least twice per month, that figure would amount to $1.92 million. Comparatively, a flat rate of $5,000 per month paid to the NWC for piped water over the same 10-year period could have saved the same household $1.32 million. Madam Speaker, this is unacceptable by any standard. Madam Speaker, in June of this year, the Barron Hill to Samuel prospect the Barron Hill to Samuel prospect 8.1 kilometer pipeline was commissioned by minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. With responsibility for water at a cost of $275 million and is phase one of the larger Dornoch and Greater Dornoch water supply rehabilitation and upgrading project. Approximately 11,500 residents from communities such as Brampton, Calabar, Hatfield, Samuel Prospect, Middlemost, and Vale Royal are currently benefiting from this infrastructure. Wow. I agree. Phase 2 of this project, which is slated to begin in this financial year, will see the replacement of the 2.4 kilometer transmission line from Dornoch to Barron Hill with an initial estimated cost of $70 million to procure the pipes. This transmission line, which may be inching closer to 100 years old, is located in a hilly terrain and subject to frequent leaks. Madam Speaker, the completion of phase 1 of the Wakefield to Bunkers Hill pipeline replacement project saw a 4-kilometer pipeline being laid on both sides of the road from Wakefield Square to Daney Crossroads in Friendship at a cost of $69 million. Phase 2 will see the installation of a 2.5-kilometer pipeline to connect a section of Unity in the vicinity of the primary school back to Daney Crossroads at an initial estimated cost of $20 million to procure the pipes. Work is expected to commence in the next financial year. Madam Speaker, the residents of King Street, Bunkers Hill, were all smiles when I visited the community recently because the commitment made while campaigning 4 years ago to supply water was fulfilled. Yes. I observed that even the nature of our conversation has changed. Back then, the discussion centered around pipes and tanks and trucking, and now it's all about water bills. Madam Speaker, I have toured a number of communities with the NWC representatives over the past 2 years in an effort to find solutions to our water distribution problem. The rehabilitation of existing wells is currently being explored as a viable option for some communities. So far, the pump station at the Belfield well has been rehabilitated and the electrical panel installed and awaiting JPS's approval. When approved, the communities of Hamden, New Carrigan, and Bounty Hall will benefit from this facility. In the next financial year, procurement will be undertaken to purchase electromechanical equipment to improve the generation and distribution system of the Queen of Spain No. 2 well. The communities of Bounty Hall again Wakefield, Friendship, Bunkers Hill, Drumley, and D-Side will benefit from this improvement. Exploratory works are being undertaken on the Panarsos well through developmental testing to determine the feasibility of recommissioning that facility. If the results are favorable, this well will service the community of Duncans and its environs, including Duncans Hills, where the residents are at their wits' end. Madam Speaker, it was brought to my attention at a meeting with residents 3 years ago that the community of Braco does not have the benefit of potable water, but instead has access only to water for irrigation purposes. You can imagine my dismay on learning that a community located along the highway where a 20-inch main runs and services residents in St. Anne does not have potable water. Madam Speaker, upon an exploratory visit to the community with representatives from the NWC, it was found that no pipeline infrastructure existed.
And that other MP didn't do anything about it.
I can report today that a project profile of the community was recently submitted and approved, and a new installation of 6-inch, 4-inch, and 2-inch pipes will be on the way. Be on the way as soon as the pipes, which are now on order, are delivered.
31. How many years?
31 years. This project is expected to cost $40 million. Madam Speaker, the issue of water in Trelawney Northern has left me quite discombobulated. With all the representatives before me being men, how has it now become a woman's responsibility to lay pipes? Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, we know that the Squatter and Environment Management Unit recently embarked on a national survey of squatter settlements.
Yes.
And from preliminary reports and my knowledge of the constituency, there are more than 30 such settlements in Trelawney Northern.
Other MP didn't know.
We know that SCJ Holdings Limited has approximately 3,600 acres of former sugar lands under its management in Trelawney, and that residents of communities such as Samuel Prospect, Greenmount, Texas, and Hamden have been in occupation of sections of these lands informally for generations. We know the root of this issue can be traced to the inadequate supply and housing affordability challenges dating back to our post-emancipation era, when newly freed people of color who were landless and destitute were made subject to the Ejectment and Trespass Acts, where persons could be ejected at a week's notice from the homes in which they were born and from which they were forced to provide free labor to a white plantocracy, with the police allowed to capture and imprison any person found in their former home after receipt of a notice of ejectment. People were left with no option but to settle illegally on lands they could find, some of which were crown lands. Madam Speaker, we know that housing remains one of the most pressing developmental challenges, and it is against this background that the National Housing Trust was established in 1976. The mission of the trust is to increase and enhance the stock of available housing in Jamaica, as well as provide financial assistance to those who need support to build, buy, or repair their homes. The trust also develops housing schemes for sale to its contributors. Madam Speaker, on July 12, 2018, the NHT had its groundbreaking ceremony for the 212-unit Windsor Hills housing development in Georgia, which was scheduled to be completed in July 2020. It is now 2 years since the scheduled completion, and Madam Speaker, to date, no information or update has been made available to the public. I am calling on the NHT to rectify this issue. Madam Speaker, Operation Program for Resettlement and Integrated Development Enterprise, popularly known as Operation Pride, was launched in 1994 to inter alia resolve the housing needs of the majority of low-income Jamaicans by developing new planned settlements and the upgrading of existing settlements. Operation Pride was described as a unique method of making land legally accessible to low-income groups at affordable prices through government subsidies. The necessity arose given the high cost of housing solutions in the formal sector, the limited available capital for housing, and the inability of the majority to access mortgages. Madam Speaker, it was the year 2000 that Operation Pride decided to utilize government lands in Cave Island for a new planned settlement. 269 members of a Providence Society signed up for lots at a subsidized cost and were promised infrastructure such as sewage, electricity, water, roads, and drains.
What them get?
Fast forward 22 years, and the promise of infrastructure remains unfulfilled because of project overruns, improper choice of location for our particular development, it's a very rocky terrain, corruption, and nepotism. Add to this, Madam Speaker, the fact that all of 10 persons have paid in full on the original price agreed. Madam Speaker, the 269 members of the Providence Society have now looked to me to solve this 22-year-old issue, which is one of 80 such informal settlements island-wide that Pride has left in its wake. Madam Speaker, it is evident that Pride will cost you everything, but leave you with nothing. What is being done?
There's hope.
There is hope.
There's hope. There's hope.
Madam Speaker, the socio-economic, health, and environmental issues associated with informal settlements are often very costly to the nation, and significant resources are required to provide the necessary infrastructure to regularize these settlements. Surveys, subdivisional plans, and valuations need to be undertaken. Electrical, sewer, and pipelines need to be installed. Roads and drains need to be constructed, and titles need to be issued. In the quest to regularize settlements at Hamden, Texas, Greenmount, and Samuel Prospect, a number of separate meetings have recently been held with the SCJ Holdings Limited and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. A path has been devised and agreed, but will require significant funding to execute. Therefore, I am making a special appeal to our most adroit and capable Minister of Finance to weigh the benefits of this project and what it will mean for all the families involved in building intergenerational wealth. Madam Speaker, prior to benefiting from the new social housing program, I lobbied with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation for the construction of a 2-bedroom unit in Wakefield for a most deserving family. This unit was completed in December last year at a cost of $8 million.
And this is what the PMP bashing.
Additionally, because nothing could be salvaged from the old structure, as you can see, I acquired for the family from personal and private donations a fridge, a stove, 2 beds, crockery, and other household items. Through the new social housing program, a 3-bedroom unit was completed this year in Wakefield and keys handed over by the Most Honorable Prime Minister.
Yes.
So far, Madam Speaker, a stove and bed have been donated to the beneficiary. I look forward to more things.
Putting it out there.
Madam Speaker, one of the first activities undertaken as Member of Parliament was an audit of the constituency to identify lands most suitable for housing. 5 parcels of 4, 16, 17, 21, and 143 acres were identified that can immediately accommodate housing developments. 1 of 5 has been proposed for phase 2 of the new social housing program for the benefit of 25 individuals. There has been positive preliminary discussion with the Housing Agency of Jamaica, exploring the housing prospects of Trelawney Northern. With the availability of these lands, I look forward to more concrete discussion in the short term, as it is my belief that government has a responsibility to produce affordable housing. Madam Speaker, I am calling on the private sector to take a chance on Trelawney Northern in the construction of affordable housing. This is but one way in which we can deliberately encourage growth in our local economy, as it will provide greater opportunities for people at all income levels. Madam Speaker, in calling for a private sector partnership, I will also encourage our construction of green buildings to reduce or eliminate negative impacts on the environment and help fight climate change. Green is always best. Madam Speaker, the Hummingbird Estate in Greenside is the first townhouse development to enter the local housing market, and we welcome this investment. The first 59 units are slated to be completed early next year, thanks to the vision of Mr. Carl Erskine and team. From this project, Madam Speaker, the community of Greenside will benefit from road rehabilitation. Madam Speaker, we know Trelawney Northern currently has 5 high schools and 17 primary schools. We lost 2 to you, Madam Speaker. From meetings held, I was able to glean from principals that all 22 schools require varying levels of intervention. Upon assessment, the most critical were identified as follows: renovation of the entire building at Brampton Primary, treatment of termite infestation at Dornvale, Granville, Hamden, Saltmarsh, Unity, Wakefield Primary, as well as Holland High, construction of an auditorium or meeting facility and nurses station at Duncan's Primary, addition of a classroom block at Falmouth All Age, construction of roof to enclose building at Falmouth Infant, construction of a retaining wall at Granville Primary, renovation of building at Hamden Primary, and paving of the schoolyard to prevent the settling of debris when it rains, because it washes all the way into the school. Construction of a gutter at Refuge Primary to prevent flooding when it rains. Repair of roof of all 8 buildings at Holland High. Equipment for students with special needs at Perth Town Academy. Madam Speaker, there is a serious issue of overcrowding at Cedric Titus, William Knibb, and Mushet High Schools. At Mushet, the school was built to accommodate 800 students, but the current complement is 1,500, and so the school is on a shift system. Cedric Titus High is also on a shift system. At William Knibb, it was reported by the principal that there are approximately 50 students in each class. The Falmouth All-Age School, being the only primary school that serves the town of Falmouth, is also affected by overcrowding. What have we done? Madam Speaker, over the last year, the Ministry of Education undertook the following capital projects at the Cedric Titus High School. $2.7 million for modification to accommodate administrative area, which is 95% complete. $3 million for consultancy for design of a new classroom block. The design is 100% complete, and the draft of the BQ is 80% complete. $10.3 million for the completion of a security fencing, which is 100% complete. The design of the classroom block, when completed, will alleviate the issue of overcrowding at Cedric Titus, but the overcrowding at William Knibb and Mushet will still be of major concern and may require the ministry to explore the possibility of constructing a new high school in the Wakefield division. Minister? For the past year, the Ministry of Education made allocations for repairs and have awarded contracts for the following: $5 million for treatment of termite infestation, repairs to detective roofs, and electric repairs at Duncan's Primary. $8 million for treatment of termite infestation and repairs to leaking roofs at the Wakefield Primary. $10 million for treatment of termite infestation, repairs to defective metal staircase and defective metal handrails, renovation of the principal's cottage, and the construction of security fencing at the Perth Town Academy. Madam Speaker, allocations have also been made and approvals awaited for critical repairs to Granville, Hastings and Waldensia primary schools in the sum of $2 million each for the treatment of termite infestation and minor electrical repairs. From the Constituency Development Fund, the sum of $1.2 million was allocated to Granville Primary to assist with the construction of a retaining wall, which was completed in the summer. The constituency education program over the last year has seen 1,913 students benefiting from tuition grants, school bags, textbooks, and stationery, and an additional 150 students benefiting from tablets. The total spent to date amounts to $10.2+ million. Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the donors both locally and internationally who came on board this year and assisted with our Back to School initiative. Madam Speaker, recently I was able to recommend my alma mater, the Falmouth Infant, to the IBEX group for support. A day was spent painting areas of the school and playground, and a donation of $250,000 made towards the school's general development. The company later donated 12 computers, various sporting equipment, books for the library, and will undertake additional infrastructure works. They will get their roof, Madam Speaker. Another recommendation was made to the US-based Family Reunion Group, the parent company for Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, for my other alma mater, Falmouth All Age, to receive support in the form of painting supplies valued at $300,000 and the provision of back-to-school vouchers from the Grace Hamilton Foundation. Madam Speaker, we understand the value of private sector partnerships and thank these two entities tremendously for their support. Madam Speaker, we know there are long-standing employment challenges in Trelawney Northern, and that these challenges arise from a multiplicity of factors. First, let me commend the Ministry of Education on the new Sixth Form Pathways program. As despite the implementational challenges, it will significantly reduce the number of students in Trelawney Northern leaving high school without the necessary qualifications to take on life. Madam Speaker, these youths are not marketable, are often taken advantage of by employers and end up in a vicious cycle of poverty or enticed into activities that run contrary to the Law Reform, Fraudulent Transactions, Special Provisions Act of 2013, and we know where that leads. Madam Speaker, those who seek to improve their marketability by turning to Hart NSTA Trust in Trelawney are not exposed to new and emerging skills such as animation, digital marketing, supply chain management, data analytics, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, or even blockchain that will prepare them for the future of work. Instead, the options are barbering, housekeeping, bartending, customer service, cosmetology, and other skills that limit them to particular industries. Madam Speaker, it is my opinion that the pandemic has accelerated the need to upskill our workforce. As a new world with new skills has emerged, it is therefore critical that our youths are fully prepared for this fourth industrial revolution. Madam Speaker, students who matriculate to tertiary institutions do not return or maintain residency in the constituency because our local economy does not have the capacity to absorb them. These youths often find themselves in a rural-urban drift, not because they necessarily want to, but because they have no other choice and are in search of a better way of life. This, I believe, Madam Speaker, is due in part to the government's policy that has persistently favored urban development at the expense of rural areas. thereby making the latter unattractive, especially to our youths. What can we do? Madam Speaker, to create employment opportunities in Trelawney Northern, we must, as a priority, improve our basic infrastructure facilities such as roads, transportation, access to potable water,
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the member be given an additional 10 minutes to complete her presentation. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I ask that the member be given 10 minutes to complete her presentation, or, Madam Speaker, we suspend the debate in... Madam Speaker, it's in your hands.
The question before the House is that the member be given sufficient time to complete her presentation. Those against, the ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. Next, there must be an improvement in the type of skills offered to our youth who should be encouraged into entrepreneurship. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, especially female-owned businesses, must be supported and developed, thereby creating employment for themselves and others. Madam Speaker, the planned development for the new town centre for Falmouth is an exciting prospect and a welcome step to urbanization, as the resultant investment and employment potential will be endless. Despite having a cruise shipping pier in the town of Falmouth, not much of the tourism dollar is retained in the space, as the product offerings within the constituency are low, and so passengers are forced to leave to explore neighboring destinations such as Montego Bay and Ocho Rios to have a good time. To plug this leak, there is an urgency to develop our tourism product. Madam Speaker, in May of this year, I submitted the Hugh Lawson Shearer Museum project proposal to the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport in honor of the Most Honorable Hugh Lawson Shearer, ONOJ, Jamaica's third Prime Minister. The proposal includes the restoration of his childhood home in Martha Brae and will serve to stimulate the economy through spin-off businesses within the community as well as through direct employment. Madam Speaker, it is with pleasure that I introduce to Jamaica for the first time the Reggae Park 420 Escape, which is a cultural park and campsite situated on over 50 acres of greenery in Friendship, Trelawney. This multidimensional product will allow guests the opportunity to have an authentic Jamaican experience through its recreational activities and will be open to the public soon. It will also be home to the premier music festival of the Caribbean, the Jamaica Jazz and Blues Festival in 2024. Madam Speaker, this investment is sure to stimulate the economy of Friendship. Yes. Madam Speaker, if our communities provide the foundation on which our nation builds to improve lives of citizens, then our communities need help. Many are plagued by infrastructure and other deficiencies, but lack the cohesion necessary to take action on issues that are important to them. The COVID-19 pandemic has also done little to help this problem, as the isolation associated with reducing the spread was the factor that had the greatest psychological impact on people's health. Madam Speaker, having a sense of community unites us, and when community development is effective, there is less crime, less disparity between citizens, and less issues that impact residents because collective solutions help individual problems. What is being done? An electrification pole extension exercise at a cost of $20.9 million is currently underway in Greenmount, where the community will be powered by the Jamaica Public Service for the first time in 60 years. Earlier this year, a community Wi-Fi hotspot was launched in the town of Wakefield by the Universal Service Fund. Two other such hotspots have since been activated in Duncan and Clarkstown. The installation of a free Wi-Fi hotspot in the town of Falmouth has also been completed. At a cost of $300,000 from the Constituency Development Fund, a garbage skip was constructed by SPM Waste Management and placed in a refuge to reduce the pileup of waste in that community. A number of community play fields were maintained over the period to facilitate use by residents. These included Falmouth Garden, Samuel Prospect, Rock, Cooper's Pen, and Charlotte Beach. Mitigation works were undertaken in all 5 divisions, especially attention given to the drains along Pitt Street, Newton Street, and Trelawney Street in Falmouth, as the regular cleaning of these drains is necessary to prevent flooding in the town. Madam Speaker, the bulky waste collection undertaken in December of last year was a success, as the lack of such a collection over time resulted in a huge pileup in some communities. Residents have expressed a desire for another round of collection, as at the end of the exercise, many still had items for disposal. The ability to respond to welfare needs of residents is critical to improve the life of the poor and vulnerable in our communities. Over the past year, 1,548 persons have benefited from welfare support in the amount of $6.3 million and the sum of $3.8 million spent on building grants. During the Christmas period last year, we embarked on a feel-good project dubbed 12 Days of Christmas Bonanza. Madam Speaker, this competition took place on social media in an effort to lift the spirits of constituents, as I observed that the pandemic had put a damper on the Christmas spirit. Persons from all over the constituency competed for the following prizes: gift baskets, phone credits, tablets, spa certificate, paints, picnic hams, Christmas cakes, wine, a television set, a shopping spree, vouchers amounting to $60,000, and a weekend for 2 at the Ocean H10 Hotel. Madam Speaker, studies show that children who have an involved father are more likely to be emotionally secure, be confident, to explore their surroundings, and as they grow older, have better social connections. In an effort, therefore, to honor the contribution of our fathers to society, 3 lucky fathers were treated with dinner for 2 packages this year in celebration of Father's Day. Madam Speaker, sports has the power to unite and inspire people in ways little else can. It can create hope and speaks to our youth in a language they can understand. In recognition of this fact, a number of sporting initiatives have received support. A personal donation was made to the team at the top 6-a-side football competition in Falmouth for the acquisition of floodlights to facilitate night football and towards sports prize monies for the winning teams. An allocation of $500,000 was made from the CDF to benefit the Trelawney Football Association as well as community leagues in Bounty Hall, Rehoboam, and Clarkstown. An additional $500,000 was allocated from the CDF for the benefit of the Trelawney Cricket Association. Madam Speaker, there is a goal to develop a Falmouth Gardens community sports complex. The features of this complex will include a multi-purpose court and fencing, construction of the football field, fencing of the perimeter, construction of 4 banks of concrete spectator seating, marking of the court, and the building of hoops, goals, and poles at a cost of $45 million. This project will be undertaken in phases, with the first phase being the construction of the multipurpose court and fencing. The sum of $7.9 million was allocated from the CDF to be executed through the Sports Development Foundation within this financial year. 1 bank of concrete spectator seating at a cost of $5 million will be constructed this year from the Tourism Product Development Company. Madam Speaker, by the time we have completed this sports complex, we will be able to give any team from St. Mary's Southeastern a run for their money. I will be the first to admit, Madam Speaker, that Falmouth is lacking in aesthetics due to our practice of relying on zinc to fence our properties. This practice has over the years created a certain stigma of persons living in these conditions that may not necessarily hold true, as I happen to know of musicians, artists, educators, engineers, craftsmen who reap success behind these fences. Madam Speaker, the time has come for us to tear down these fences. Yes. The zinc fence removal project for lots 2, 3, 4, 157, 60, 160, and 168 Cave Island Pen, which covers Peel Street and Wakefield Drive in Falmouth, has been approved and is now in the procurement stage. The project will cost $6.2 million. Madam Speaker, this has caused significant inconvenience to residents, not just of Wakefield, but also the surrounding communities of Friendship, Bunkers Hill, Drumley, Greenville, and Deeside. The elderly and disabled have been most affected, and numerous appeals have been made to my office to resolve this issue. After dialogue with the CEO of the Postal Corporation of Jamaica, and upon facilitating a site visit to the area, it was decided that a container will be procured by the end of this year and retrofitted to house the new post office in Wakefield. We await word from the Trelawney Municipal Corporation for no objection to utilize the grounds of the old market. Madam Speaker, we know that every single road in Trelawney Northern has suffered from extreme deterioration for decades, and there can be no meaningful recovery of the constituency unless they are rehabilitated. The Falmouth to Springville control section is the legacy of all legacies and has always been highly contentious and the center of much controversy. What have we done? Over the last year, the following roads have been rehabilitated. Steelfield in Spicy Hill through Rada at $8.3 million, Pitt Street Falmouth through Spruce Up at $3 million, sections of the Reserve Road through the CDF at $3.3 million, sections of Bottomtown, Clarkstown through the December 2021 mitigation program at $2.5 million, Texas Danieltown through the December 2021 mitigation program at $4.5 million, phase 1 of Saltmarsh to Kent at a cost of $17 million, sections in Logwood Valley and additional works in Unity at $4 million, phase 1 of Deeside to Drumley at a cost of $17 million, phase 2 of the Rio Bueno to Jacksontown, Calabar and Brampton at a cost of $13 million, the reconstruction of the Gabion Basket along Granville Main Road through the December mitigation program at a cost of $1 million, and currently, Madam Speaker, under rehabilitation is the Wakefield to Deeside section of Falmouth to Springvale Road, which was seen under protest in many, many news items, Madam Speaker, at a cost of $145 million. In the months ahead, there will be intervention on the following roads. Zion through the upcoming December 2022 mitigation program with an allocation estimated to be about $7 million. Comfort Hall and Blackwind through RADA at an allocation of $9 million each, and this will be done in the third quarter of this financial year. Madam Speaker, it is being proposed that some attention be placed on our secondary roads, as despite the jurisdiction of these residing with municipalities, MPs are being placed under tremendous pressure to act. For me in the north, that means every single community. Madam Speaker, once again, our hard-working minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation with responsibility for works towards sections of the constituency for a second time, and was instantly reminded that Trelawney Northern tops the list of having the most deplorable roads in Jamaica. The minister came, the minister saw, the minister responded. Madam Speaker, it is therefore with great pleasure that I announce approval for the following projects. Falmouth to Springvale, the Martha Bray Leg, $20 million for this year. Deeside to Drumley, Phase 2, $20 million for this year. Saltmarsh to Kent, Phase 2, $20 million for this year. Rock to Stewarttown, the Long Pond to Jacksontown Leg, $40 million for this year. Martha Bray to Kinloss, $41 million for this year. Falmouth to Springvale, the Holland to Bounty Hall Leg, at $200 million for the next financial year. Madam Speaker, we know the history, we know the legacy, and because we have been given the tools to analyze our past, we now know we have been dealt a bad hand for 30 years, and we know the warning signs. Madam Speaker, I have learned in my 2 short years that as political representatives, we face many challenges and obstacles in our quest to serve our people and our nation. I have also learned that smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. Madam Speaker, there has been quite a bit of noise in Trelawney Northern recently, but so much of the constituency's time has already been lost to empty barrels in the past that I must heed the warning signs and go placidly amid these noisy markets. Because, Madam Speaker, time wasted is worse. We'll never neglect them. Madam Speaker, wasted time is worse than wasted money, and the 36,442 buyers currently in the market of Trelawney Northern are already sold on their recovery. Madam Speaker, I am nothing without my dedicated team, my loving family, and my ever-faithful and supportive extended family of Trelawney Northern.
Yes.
And by all means, the grace of God. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member for her presentation, although she had to hasten the conclusion. I now ask that the debate be suspended.
Question before the members is that the constituency debate be suspended. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The debate is suspended.
Madam Speaker, I ask for the recommittal of statements by ministers to allow the Prime Minister to make a statement at this time.
The question before the House is that we have the recommittal of the item on the agenda statements. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, the leader of opposition business had inquired as to whether or not I would make a statement on the passage of then Tropical Storm Ian. Before that, in another engagement, I had indicated that I would address Parliament as soon as a report was made by the NWA. I received the report from the NWA yesterday. They were quite efficient in preparing it, but I was not able to address the House yesterday when the statement was delivered. So, Madam Speaker, we are all aware of the passage of Tropical Storm Ian over the last few days. After passing Jamaica, Ian strengthened into a hurricane and hit western Cuba and is now on course to hit Florida as a strong Category 4 hurricane. It's Category 5 now. Well, this was prepared yesterday, Category 5. Madam Speaker, I am a fervent believer in the Almighty, and I give thanks on behalf of the people of Jamaica that the winds shifted enough for us to only have experienced the outer bands of the storm. I am even more grateful that we did not suffer any loss of life resulting from the passage of the system. God to be praised. Madam Speaker, the rains associated with Tropical Storm Ian, now Hurricane Ian, started affecting the island on Friday, September 23rd, 2022. Madam Speaker, the members will recall that I was away on official government business, but I cut short my trip overseas to ensure that I was here to oversee preparations relating to the storm. Since Friday, the island experienced continuous rainfall. Many places were flooded and others experienced landslides, fallen trees, and scoured road surfaces. The continuous rain left some communities marooned, especially those in low-lying and flood-prone areas along the southern coast. Madam Speaker, the information received from the National Works Agency suggests that the parishes hardest hit were St. Catherine, Clarendon, and other parishes to include Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Trelawney, and Portland. The NWA as its mandate, assumed the role for the NWA, as per its mandate, assumed the central role in the intermediate aftermath of the flood rains by mobilizing equipment and personnel to clear blocked roads and restore access to communities. The agency is now undertaking a rapid assessment to determine the full extent of the impact of the rains, as well as to enable the determination for additional remediation or remedial measures. Madam Speaker, primary consideration has been given to those corridors along which first responders such as the Jamaica Public Service, NWC, and ODPEM would be required to use, so those areas have been cleared. And in clearing these areas, Madam Speaker, this would include mainly the clearing of debris and other materials that would have been washed on the road and any landslides. Madam Speaker, as of today, most, if not all, the areas for which water had accumulated would have already receded. Madam Speaker, several communities, especially within the parishes of St. Catherine and Clarendon, were impacted by the flood rains. There are reports of damaged roads to varying degrees, especially in low-lying areas. The NWA's initial assessment is that approximately 47 roads were badly affected by landslides, mud flows, down trees, or inundation, which rendered some communities inaccessible and some communities were marooned. But, Madam Speaker, as of now, as I've said, the floodwaters have receded and communities which were previously inaccessible would have now their access would have been restored. I am pleased to inform this Honourable House that all roads have been reopened, with the exception of the corridors from Chapelton to Rock River in the north, Mackney to Douglas Castle, St. John's to Pedro River, and Thatch Walk Bridge in Anion Town. The alley road in southern Clarendon was damaged due to the Rio Minnow overflowing and scoring a small section of the northern approach to the bridge. Access to this roadway has been restored. The road from Lower Chapelton to Rock River suffered a breakaway in the community of Sutton. This section of road will have to be rebuilt in order for it to be reopened. So this road, Madam Speaker, would be one of the significant areas of damage which will last for a little while until we can repair it. Madam Speaker, following directives to the NWA, I'm pleased to report that several other locations within the parish of Clarendon are now accessible, and these include Kemp's Hill, Cupius to Colonel's Ridge, Trout Hall, and Denby to Manchester Avenue. Madam Speaker, the Bogwalk Gorge has been reopened. The road was closed before the heavy rainfalls we experienced on Monday. This was done after consultation among our key disaster management agencies, including police, fire, and ODPEM. This was done to ensure the safety of all persons who would likely enter into that space with the possibility of being washed away by floodwaters. Madam Speaker, there is a significant risk of persons being killed in the gorge under such circumstances. We have had persons being trapped and even killed in the Bogwalk Gorge. And Madam Speaker, by now, members of this House would have seen the video of persons attempting to break the lock at the gate at Dam Head. What the public has not seen is that the locks were actually removed and the gate opened. Persons were successful in removing the lock, and therefore persons entered that space notwithstanding the public warning that was given and the physical barrier that was placed at the location. This kind of behavior is reprehensible and should not be tolerated. License plates were identifiable from the camera footage. The police have been directed to do a thorough investigation, and the persons involved should face the full force of the law. Madam Speaker, we have gone through great lengths to ensure the safety of every Jamaican who uses our roads, especially under adverse weather conditions. Madam Speaker, we cannot and we will not condone this kind of behavior. It not only places the lawbreaker at risk, but every other citizen who would traverse that area would now be at risk. Madam Speaker, I know that there have been reports in the press regarding how persons in the area would access their homes when the gorge is closed. And while we understand residents wishing to be home or to leave, there are circumstances when it would be deadly to do so. And, Madam Speaker, I go further. When we close the gates, it is because we have assessed that it is dangerous to move. So it is for their safety. Madam Speaker, before we constructed the gates, consultations were held with members of the communities along the gorge. It was understood that the locations where the gates were finally erected were the most suitable locations. As it relates to the gate at Damhead, the understanding was that no motor vehicle would go beyond the gate if it is closed. But if for whatever reasons residents would have gotten to that point, they would use a road that is behind the gorge to access their homes. This road is not accessible to motor vehicles, but only to pedestrians. The gates are there for everyone's safety. It is not about locking out or locking in anyone. It is for the protection of every Jamaican who happens to use that road. Madam Speaker, the NWA's first step in response to the impact of all the flood rain events was to achieve clearance of affected corridors. And as I have reported, we have achieved that. The works to achieve this were undertaken by private contractors who are party to the agency's framework agreement, which speaks to the application of preset rates for the engagement of different types of equipment in carrying out road clearance works under emergency circumstances. In addition, Madam Speaker, for roadways that have been damaged and for retaining walls that have been damaged, designs are now being done for the repair of the roads and for retaining walls and pavements as required. Madam Speaker, the NWA is continuing with the cleaning and clearing of roads across the country. Not only would we be responsible for the roads that have been scoured and the retaining walls that have been destroyed, but there is significant debris that is on some roads, which make them not impassable, but difficult to drive on. So sand and gravel sometimes would have accumulated, trees would have fallen, and Madam Speaker, the truth is a significant volume of waste, municipal waste, plastic bottles and all kinds of wastes have accumulated on some of our roads. So the NWA is doing that cleaning and clearing. But the NWA is also cleaning drains in the aftermath. We have to do this, Madam Speaker, because sometimes when we have heavy rains, the heavy rains clean the drains. But there are other occasions, particularly where you have silt traps and other protective coverings on the drains get blocked up as a result of debris coming in. So the NWA is now, Madam Speaker, cleaning critical drains. Madam Speaker, the country would have become accustomed over the last 4 years to this presentation giving $1 billion plus assessment for damage, sometimes even $2 billion for damages. Madam Speaker, thankfully this time around, we will not have to spend as much. The very preliminary estimates to reopen roads and make surfaces drivable is $360 million. Preliminary, it might increase a little bit more, but thankfully, Madam Speaker, it is not in the billions. So the Minister of Finance is sitting very easy, very calm. The cost of permanent repairs are being assessed, and over the next 2 weeks, I will update Parliament as to what those would be. Certainly for the repair of retaining walls that have been destroyed, those costs might be a little bit more, but again, we're not expecting to see a $1 billion bill for repairs. Madam Speaker, the costs that I've just outlined here, we're not expecting that there will be any significant new budget allocations for the repairs. So the NWA would have to look in its budget to see how these repairs can be addressed. Madam Speaker, I'm so impressed with hearing the performance of the MPs of how the government has managed to make allocations for projects. And, you know, we will always admit it's not enough because we have had decades of disinvestment. So the general public will always say not enough is being done. We're aware of the gap that existed and how fast we're closing the gap. It would be a different conversation. So Madam Speaker, as it relates to the clearing of the roads, clearing of the drains, and the necessary works to make roads drivable and communities accessible, the NWA is responding out of its budget. There may have to be, however, some allocations for example, the repair of retaining walls when those are fully assessed. And those are usually major expenditure, Madam Speaker, which we could not expect the NWA to take on without diverting resources from other major projects. So, Madam Speaker, I'm saying that the works needed to restore roads, to make them passable and drivable, the NWA is already doing that. For the major works that may have to be done, which I had outlined earlier, mostly in Clarendon, and there are a few roads in Kingston and St. Andrew. I know there's a road in the Minister of Finance's constituency that was totally destroyed. So there are some major works, but they're not going to be significant. And the Minister, I'm sure, if there is a supplementary to come, will make up a small provision to ensure that it is repaired. And I've seen the situation regarding the Troy Bridge, and I'm following it. I've been briefed that the designs are complete. My understanding is that they're about to go to procurement soon. So, you know, it's not a situation of which we are proud. And I must, I mean, I saw your outburst. I saw the representation made by our Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to say that the government of Jamaica takes these situations very seriously. And it is not our intention for the people to believe that their plight is not considered as serious. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I'm going to be personally visiting Troy. I will make the arrangements, and we have been moving to fast track the arrangements to ensure that the bridge is in place. Madam Speaker, as I close, I ask all Jamaicans to whisper a word of prayer for our families and friends in Florida who will be experiencing this super strong hurricane, and to give a thought for the people in Cuba, our neighbors, who have also experienced significant ravaging from the hurricane. Madam Speaker, this would be the conclusion of my statement. I wish to apologize to members before I take my seat that I might only be able to take one question, as I have a partnership signing agreement which the members opposite would understand it is important that we make it on time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, permission to speak from a seat other than mine. Madam Speaker, we appreciate the statement from the Prime Minister, and we too on this side, we are happy that we have no reported loss of life, and we also, concerned for our neighbors in the north and the damage that was done in Cuba. They had loss of life, and hoping that the brunt of the hurricane that has hit the west coast of the USA, Florida, that there's not, the damage is one that they can recover quickly from. And we also have been spared the brunt of the hurricane or the tropical storm at the time, getting the outer bands. And we have been fortunate to have to give God thanks, as you have said, Prime Minister, that over the last couple of years we have been spared. We can only consider ourselves a blessed people. Yeah? But Prime Minister, just with the assessment that has been done, and I'm sure that you have been listening to the presentations by those who have made presentations in the State of the Constituency debate, and the issue of just maintenance of our drains. You yourself, Prime Minister, spoke about a comprehensive overview look at our critical drains across the island. I think it was in your own budget debate you spoke about looking at how it is that you can start the implementation coming from that report. And you started out by speaking of the one in the North Gully in Montego Bay. But as we have seen over the past few years, Prime Minister, through you, Madam Speaker, the damage that has been done because of the lack of proper drainage and the inadequacy of our drainage. The inadequacy, the member from East Rural St. Andrews is giving me a little trouble out there. But the inadequacy of the drains, Prime Minister. And I come back to my original statement in the debate and what I've been saying for quite a number of years. What we get at the beginning of a hurricane season is just inadequate. And I know we're going to speak about the cost, but in a report that has been done by the National Works Agency, it said if we spent the money up front, we would spend less whenever we have activities like these, because we end up spending over 60% more than what we spend at the beginning of the hurricane season to deal with damaged roads and dealing with the drains itself. No, and that's the point I'm making. So when a constituency like mine or East Rural or West Rural get $1 million for drain cleaning, in June or July. By the end of July into early August, those same drains are already blocked. So we have to look at a system, because these rainfalls are coming more regular than we would. Climate change has changed the whole aspect of how it is that we get our rainfalls, how often it is, and the amount of hurricanes that pass through the region. So we have to look at a way in how we systematically clean these drains during that hurricane period, that we spend less in a time like this. And hopefully that many houses are not damaged the way that they are. But I want to ask the Prime Minister, is there going to be, that report that you speak of, dealing with our critical drains, is there going to be an implementation schedule in dealing with even the earth drains? Like when you come across that corridor coming into Clarendon, going towards Manchester, all of that is earth drains. Are we going to upgrade them? If you look at the town of Maypen itself, and you look at Santa Cruz, a lot of these townships get flooded even just a day of rain. Is there going to be an implementation? Is it seriously being looked at in dealing with some of these drains? We're fortunate enough, and I'm sure that the bill is going to be more than the 360 million that you're looking at. Yeah, 360. But outside of these roadways that are damaged and will be brought back to some semblance of proper usage for the road users, is there going to be a comprehensive road patching program or maintenance program right across the island? And the reason being, when the last time you were coming to Manchester, you were coming through that section, Scott's Pass, that was in that condition for nearly 2 years. Thank God we have gotten a little reprieve, but it is right back to where it was with the rains that fell this week and into last week. And because we have been getting regular rainfalls, many roadways are in a deplorable condition. Is there going to be, seeing that you are the minister with responsibility for works, is there going to be a program that will be put in place that will deal with some of those roadways that are in deplorable conditions prior to the passing of Ian?
Firstly, we have committed to a comprehensive drainage study, and the NWA already has aspects of a drainage study. One was done for the corporate area, and we have identified and placed in the Montego Bay Perimeter Road project a comprehensive study for that area. As we build out the road infrastructure around the island, particularly our highways, they are designed with adequate capacity drainage. So you would see that the roads that we have built here in the corporate area, the roads that we're building now on the South Coast Road Improvement, plus the others that are planned, you wouldn't see much issue with drainage. There are some issues where the communities have complained that runoff from the roads would cause some flooding, but we're going to be addressing that as well. I noticed that there was one report in the media that one of NROC's project would have caused a problem to a community, but that was not accurate. That's not accurate, and the NROC is going to make a statement correcting that. But the point, member, is that we are already on way with doing our national studies, and some of them are actually being implemented. All right, so you're going to see improvement in drainage, particularly for the new roads that are constructed. Now, in terms of the older roads, and let me use as an example Clarendon, the road leading into Maypen, coming from Minister Morgan's constituency, road, Soursop Turn. Those drainage would have to be addressed when we do a comprehensive upgrade of that corridor, and that is under consideration now. So the plan, member, is that as we improve the roads, we will be improving the drains as well. Now, your point is that in parallel with improving drainage, we need to also increase the maintenance budget and schedule. And we would never dispute that point. I think we are spending as much as we can. I have just today signed off on another round of routine maintenance. So each member of parliament will get an allocation to do drain cleaning again. But I wish to make 2 points on what you have raised. The first point is that regardless of how we increase the maintenance schedule and increase the maintenance budget, the truth is that the drains that we have are not designed for the level of runoff that we have. So they're very small and they will get clogged very easily. They simply, however, cannot carry the volume of water that is there. So even if they are clean, the volume of water will still create some flooding, but only temporary. So if you notice, member, when we have heavy rainfall, you will have some amount of flooding, but it runs off fairly quickly. By the very day or the following day, the water is off. That speaks to the size of the drain not being able to take the water off the road as the rain is falling. So therefore you would have a backup and flooding. So I don't know if I could be standing in Parliament and saying the government will allocate the resources to increase all the size of all the drains in the country. That's not going to be the solution. So the strategy is that as we build out the new roads, we build out adequate drainage, right? To take water off some of the local roads, to capture runoff from local roads, to ensure that the existing drains, some of them are built hundreds of years ago, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, some of those drains are not placed under pressure. The second thing is that we have to do much better at capturing our waste, because smaller drains, in addition to waste getting in them, creates the problem. So, Madam Speaker, we have put in place a plan now, which we are going to be executing shortly, which will see Jamaica's waste problem being corrected in a significant way. So it's going to be greater collection of garbage, the development of a sanitary landfill, and eventually a waste-to-energy plant. And that you will be hearing much more about. I'm sure they have met with the member from Western St. Andrew about the decommissioning of Riverton, and they would have briefed you on the plans. So, Madam Speaker, we're taking a comprehensive approach to this problem. So, I agree with the member. Yes, more funds have to be allocated, and we have been increasingly doing so. I think the member can say that we have been very disciplined in making resources available to MPs for drain cleaning and maintenance. Christmas, MPs will get a fairly decent allocation to treat with a few of the difficult roads that you have, and we hope that MPs have been using those allocations wisely to treat with those roads that may be overlooked by the central authority. And in addition to that, we'll be treating with the garbage situation, which is also creating the problem of blockage in our very small drains. Madam Speaker, in a closing statement, Jamaica's existing infrastructure is not fit for purpose in the era of climate change. It's just not. It's just the reality. And we will have to make strategic investment decisions in how we deploy our capital. So, Madam Speaker, this administration has sought to build highways and roadways that are not just, asphalt surfaces, but they have proper piping infrastructure for water, proper infrastructure for internet connectivity, proper infrastructure for drainage and other smart technologies embedded in them. More than that, Madam Speaker, we have sought to put the roads, when we are building them, the major roads, more inland, and they have been elevated. And this will ensure the resilience of our infrastructure to weather events such as this. Madam Speaker, we did not get the full brunt of the hurricane, but increasingly I am having more confidence that were there to be a weather event, that our capacity to withstanding it is much improved than it was before. So we acknowledge, we understand. We're going to have these major weather events, and what the Jamaican population should take comfort in is that the government has a strategy and a plan. It is cognizant of the issue of climate change and how it is impacting the weather, and we are building out our capital and infrastructure to ensure that it can withstand, and if we do have an impact, that we can recover quickly. So, Madam Speaker, that would be my response to the member from Manchester North, and I thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the permission to respond.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, on the public business, we will now continue the debate. No, I've already suspended. Yeah. Yeah, we did suspend it. So we will now continue the debate on the Special Economic Zone Amendment Act 2022. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, such is the importance of this bill and the amendments that I have decided that I would not be able to, or maybe I'll be late in participating in the ceremonies at King's House. But, Madam Speaker, the truth is that the bill that is before us to amend the SEZ Act, while the amendments that are being proposed are seems on the face of them very short amendments, they are nevertheless of significance. They will, Madam Speaker, in significant ways alter the regime that is currently in place, and with it, we have. I think there is the risk we run that that could lessen the impact of investments in the zone. So, Madam Speaker, permit me to just say a couple of things. One is that this is a major tool, investment tool. It was designed as such to attract investment into a special economic zone and really to mark an important point of development for Jamaica. And especially, Madam Speaker, for what is now understood and agreed as a national project, the Logistics Hub Initiative. That was the core of the thinking at the time, and this represents a practical tool for its implementation. And so, Madam Speaker, I speak as someone who has some paternity and at the same time, as I see the amendment, some concerns about what is being attempted. Madam Speaker, I want to speak specifically about the attempt, well, not the attempt, the decision in the bill, the act and what the bill proposes to do, which is to remove and to add to the exclusion of the activities in the zone, which is an entire set of activities around intellectual property. And Madam Speaker, that is a profound act, because I think it can be fully appreciated that there's almost nothing that is done today in both industrial, commercial, and other activities that does not in one way or the other implicate and have real, brings with it real opportunities for intellectual property, both in its formation, and we now know in terms of the regime we have in place that we have registrable regimes and assets that can be implemented in Jamaica, having regard to the Madrid Protocol, the Patent Act, the Copyright Act, and a range of other IP statutes, rules and regulations that are now in place. Yet the OECD, through its harmful, what it describes as harmful taxation, is insisting that this particular activity be excluded from the zone. It is far-reaching in its implication, no question about it. And the effect of that is continuing blacklisting of the country for its non-compliance. Madam Speaker, the particular provision to be addressed is really Section 41 substantially, and subsection and Section 5. Those two sections are really the crux of the problem that we're having. I will also say, Madam Speaker, that Section 5, which addresses the substantial, real definition of substantial activities, which it is now being insisting that Act is amended to reflect. The fact is, Madam Speaker, in the administration of the SEZ zones, many of these are in application. Many of these requirements are being applied in the administration. But there is the requirement, again, by the OECD, that these be reflected in the regulation. And there's some reason, there's good reason for that, because in most instances, the investor will not be aware of what happens administratively just from a viewing of the legislation itself. So that to have it in the face of the legislation is an important aspect of how you attract your investment, and people know what are the criteria and can make their investment decision based on those criteria. So it is an important activity. However, I would say, Madam Speaker, apart from the requirement and the insistence of the OECD that these amendments be brought into effect, we, as we look at the opportunity and how creative we can be, and policy-wise, to give some policy direction about aspects of this bill I think I need to comment on, because I think there's a missed opportunity. There is a missed opportunity on the policy aspects of it, because when we look at Section 5 and we look at the criteria, the 3 criteria that are listed to give life to the substantial activity, substantial activities that are required. The first of which is that we have a number of qualified employees, which on the face of it is good. However, I would say, Madam Speaker, that the issue of numbers of employees and qualified employees really in many instances will be tied to the nature of the activities and the investment that is involved. When you take out the IP activities, which are really the core of your investment, to where you innovate and you're creative and you can take the investment to another level, which itself is what will determine the level of employment and the quality of that employment. When you take that out, you really are gutting the legislation in important ways. You're taking away some very important developmental activities from the legislation. And this is of major concern. The Leader of Opposition yesterday opened and spoke exclusively to this particular concern that we have. And I want to amplify that remains a concern with far-reaching implications. So the question is, if we focus primarily or exclusively on employment, the question is, what sort of employment will we be able to get over time? Is it simply the bottom of the barrel? Is it simply the low skills employment? Or are we going to insist that we have a regime in place that upgrades and focuses on the skilled and the highly skilled employment? In addition to that, Madam Speaker, the reality is that with technology, a lot of what is coming in place is automation. And therefore, what you have, because of the challenges around the labor and the whole issue of labor, whether it be in the supply chain or in different activities, labor remains a concern. In fact, I've heard the Prime Minister himself opine and express concern about availability of labor in many areas, in the construction sector and in different areas. What is happening with investment in these areas is that technology is playing and replacing labor in some very significant ways. And it's not for us, our challenge is not simply to insist that we have more people in it. Because if you do that, then what you're getting is the bottom of the barrel, the kinds of investment. So we have complaints about BPO. BPO is an important activity, we know that, but there are concerns about the quality and the levels of employment. And in order to change that perception and the reality for BPO, we're going to have to increase the technology content and the creativity, innovation content in it, and to move not just from call center, but to KPOs and other highly skilled levels of activity, and that requires technology. And so to remove this technology piece and the IP with it is significant. Now, I'm aware that there's a discussion about replacing what remedial activity takes place after. Between now and March 31st. Minister, both sides, we have been through this. We know what it is for legislation to get legislation through. We have on our side a particular experience with the Banking Act and the amendment to the Banking Act. Even now, years after, we haven't seen those. I'm hoping that with this kind of pressure, we will be able to move assiduously and in fact get something in place. But even so, my question, and when you come to respond, I'd really like for you to respond specifically to this question, which is the remedy between the time this amendment come into effect and March 31st, what it is that is expected to be accomplished. Is this outside of the zone, and will this require a separate company to carry out those activities, or the entity or entities involved in those activities, once we put a regime in place, can still be actors within the special economic zone? Assuming there are no, and that's a question, are there any? And if there are, if there are any, how do we treat with them? Because part of the existing legislation requires that these persons are treated with in a particular way. And the suggestion that we will remove them, even with the notice period, may be problematic on a reading of an interpretation of the law as it is now. May be problematic, and I wonder if you've gotten advice as to whether, assuming there are actors in that way, whether you're not subjecting yourself or leaving yourself open to some sort of claim, legal claim or damages. That's a question that the government needs to satisfy itself on, but it is of real concern on a reading of the existing legislation. Minister, I will say that it's unfortunate, but it is part of our condition as developing countries that we get driven into these situations at a pace that we are not even able to really address sufficiently. Because the truth is, the SEZ Act needs amendment in some other important ways. I want to make reference quickly to energy and the situation of energy in the special economic zone. Because, Minister, the truth is, when we contemplated the legislation, it contemplated not only service activities, but industrial and manufacturing activities, important industrial and manufacturing activities. The fact is that the strictures under this current regulation really requires that for any substantial industrial activity to take place, and a reading of the existing legislation, there's a major question as to whether industrial parks developed independently, funded independently, having their own electricity generation capacity independently, have to turn over those capacity to JPS so that JPS can generate and then sell the electricity back to those parks. That is really a killer. It will kill industry. It will kill any investment in these areas. And Minister, first I'm very pleased that you're here, because although the Minister of State is responsible and is piloting this legislation, it is substantially about the Finance Ministry and revenues and taxation, whether it be within tax losses or, as the OECD complained, shifting of taxes. So we have important issues to resolve around the SEZ Act, and outside of this urgency to get this, and it's a hard date, I recognize, that we have some more work to do, some cleaning up work to do to really make this an effective tool, Minister, because the energy question is a glaring one. But removing IP from this is really gutting this legislation. And in a sense, you can call it regime change. In a real sense, you can call it regime change. But on this side, we are concerned about what is happening. I think also, as I have discussed with the Minister, there's a missed opportunity to also, rather than restricting the income source and the activities and the substance requirement to just zones in Jamaica, there's a real opportunity for us to look regionally and to expand it regionally, whether it be goods trade or services, to look regionally, because the single market and economy invites us to do that. Whether we take advantage or not, I think it's a question of policy and a question of will. And yes, there's need for some negotiation, because I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. There's need for some negotiation, but I believe leadership can do it to make this a much more meaningful a tool for investment and development of not only Jamaica but the region. So these are some missed opportunities I think we are foregoing in the rush to get this through. But this is our lived reality, that these things happen and we have to meet it. But Minister, those concerns remain, and I'd really like for them to be recognized at a minimum, and to see how best we can address them, whether it be now or in some future amendments that we must undertake to make this a better working tool for development and for attracting investment inward into Jamaica. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too am very concerned at the pace at which we are moving to introduce these very impactful provisions in a law that wasn't easy in the first place to have passed in this country. Members will recall that we had a regime before this called the free zone regime, where we promised investors who came to Jamaica that they would benefit in perpetuity, a certain regime. We changed that on them, but it wasn't without some upheaval and difficulty. And I know that there was tremendous consultation in getting the investors to eventually agree to the internationalization of this type of regime. It came about through tremendous consultation. And I want, the first question I'm asking the Minister, has there been consultation with the industry on this matter? I am trying to grapple with this issue, this preoccupation about intellectual property rights. And sometimes when we are members of these bodies, they advance their interests to our detriment. Our people are good at certain talents that we possess, certain things that we create, our creativity. I recall, Madam Speaker, when we established the Caribbean Institute of Technology some years ago in Montego Bay, we were training Jamaicans, high school leavers, in the various programming languages. And these were crash courses done in 6 months. And when the Indians came to assess our Jamaicans, they were astonished that these youngsters in 6 months could write. Those days it was C++ and so on, software. I used to be the Minister of Technology. No, I don't understand those things anymore. But they were amazed that they could compare with the PhD students in India, the Jamaicans here, and that there were certain skill sets that we were better at. The use of colors, the use of music. And we thought that in establishing an ICT sector in Jamaica, that we would quite rightly start at the lower level. We started doing call centers. Then we went up to BPO because of the liberalization of telecommunications. But that was not the vision. The vision was for Jamaica to participate in the full range of value-added services, robotics, the like, where we're talking about artificial intelligence now. Everything requires software development, intellectual property. That's what our people have. That's the value that we bring to this business. We're not going to be manufacturing motor vehicles and those things anymore. We might eventually do rare earth here. But it is the services that we expose our greatest proficiencies. And I'm wondering why we can't stoutly, in collaboration with our colleagues in the Caribbean, resist some of these things. we are at disadvantages in so many areas. So there are many countries in the same SEZ regime with cheaper electricity. But you don't hear Jamaica calling and say, boy, you know, what we want to do is to make it even. We want to make the playing field level so that our investors can generate their own electricity in the zone, because the zone is as if you are operating in an external space. That's the benefit of free zone, or the SEZ as we now have it. So, Madam Speaker, it took us a long time to build this thing, you know. And we have to pay tribute to Mr. Siaga before. Our side did well with the BPO. And let us not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because, no, of course, the member from Western St. Andrew has been a tremendous advocate for recognizing our strengths. Because this is what we have. This is what we have to offer to the world, and we can become first world if we are not bludgeoned by these international rules that are decidedly unfairly placed. And that's correct. No. One size doesn't fit all. I really believe that some of these things we have to stoutly resist. And this is an area that I believe, Minister, we have to go back and say, listen, let us reel and come again. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, this is not my bill, but the subject matter is definitely one with which I'm familiar. Right. Just a few comments in response to some of the questions you've asked and the comments you've made. The first is to recognize that we live in a globally interconnected world, a world characterized by deep interdependence between and among countries. And to facilitate integration of trade and of commerce, and to have free-flowing cross-border investment and flows of capital, countries negotiate between themselves double taxation agreements to ensure that their investors who invest overseas are not subject to double taxation, etc. And Jamaica has been improving and increasing the number of such agreements that we have. One metric of how investor-friendly a country is the number of double taxation agreements that it has. So countries in our part of the hemisphere, like Costa Rica, they have a big number. Right? I think we are probably up to about, if I'm not mistaken, we're up to under 20. I think the number is about 15 or thereabouts. Now, the thing with when you enter into a double taxation agreement with another jurisdiction, then if they pay tax here, then they would not pay tax on the same activity in their home country. And the reason why this particular provision is a problem, and remember, this problem was identified by the Forum of Harmful Tax Practices under BEPS, in which Jamaica is a member. And there's a peer review process. It's something that Jamaica signed up to many, many years ago. Jamaica is not the only country. There are, I believe, I'm going to give you an estimate because I don't have the right number, but I don't have the exact number, but at least over 150 countries that are members of this framework where you have peer-to-peer reviews. And a review was conducted of Jamaica in 2020 of the SEG regime, and this was pointed out as being harmful to other countries with whom we have double taxation agreements. And the reason why it's potentially harmful is that intellectual property activities have the property of being able to be picked up and located anywhere, right? Because it's, right, royalties, etc., etc. And with the regime that we have here, what would happen is you'd have nobody about an investor's preference to locate an investment, foreign investors. So leaving a domestic market overseas and locating their investment here. But I want to make sure that that's an investment that is an investment of substance and not one that is simply, right? So that is, right. So that is the nature of the concern. And if we want to continue to have foreign investors here, which depends on us entering into double taxation agreements with other countries, then we have to be mindful of their concerns. It takes two hands to clap. It's not a unilateral arrangement where we can simply do as we please and have investors from other jurisdictions coming here and investing. We are in a partnership with other countries, and the regime that is in place as of now is threatening to the revenue base of other countries, because while it won't necessarily benefit, the concern is you can have activities that don't really benefit us in terms of employment generation, in terms of, commercial and economic activities in the country. It could at the same time deprive them. And that is a problem. And it's a problem that, as a responsible citizen of the world economy, we're duty bound to address. And that's the reason for the exclusion of that particular activity from the SEZ going forward. Now, to the extent that there are entities operating under this, in these activities within the SEZ, they'll be grandfathered until March of 2023, and a new regime that is compatible with the Forum Against Harmful Tax Practices would come into place to replace that. So this is the reason. Now, some of the stuff that you mentioned, we have to be sort of careful. The SEZ was set up for us to encourage new activities, and preferably new activities that generate foreign exchange, i.e. you're engaging with the outside world. What we don't want to do and what we can't afford to do is to cannibalize the domestic revenue base of the country. That would not serve our interests. So with the, any changes that we have to make to the SEZ regime can't be at the expense of Jamaica's future revenue potential. But I'll leave the Minister to respond to the remaining comments and questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I'd like to thank both the member from Western St. Andrew and a member from East Kingston and Port Royal for their contribution, and of course the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, as was mentioned earlier, that this is a successor to the Jamaica Export Free Zone Act of 1992, and as mentioned by the member from East Kingston and Port Royal, former Prime Minister Siaga would have worked significantly on this particular regime. But of course, we have to give credit as well to the member from Western St. Andrew, who has always championed the cause of a logistic hub and the elements of the free zone itself. But I want to assure the member, Madam Speaker, that the current exclusion of the IP is not an exclusion in itself in perpetuity. The persons who are engaged in such activity now are allowed to continue those activities 31st, 2023, and with your expertise and experience, as was discussed with you before, we would call on you, of course, as we craft the new IP regime that will govern the operators within the free zone. So innovation, yes, I agree, is an important part of what we do, and as Jamaicans, we are very creative and innovative. And we always will continue to ensure that that innovation continues. But we want to ensure that profit shifting, which is a major global problem, that the global solution that is found, we are a part of that global solution because, as was mentioned by the Minister, we have to trade in a global world. With regards to the number of employees, as you mentioned, we want to ensure, Madam Speaker, that we are not condoning the existence of shell companies within the free zone. And therefore, these requirements are a part of a general requirements of persons who want to operate in the free zone, that it has employees adequate to the operations that they have in that particular SEZ. You mentioned the issue of manufacturing and energy, and of course that is a matter that I guess will be discussed at some other point, but as far as this bill is concerned, that is not here on the table at the moment. With regards to regional expansion, of course, Jamaicans are enterprising, our companies are forward-thinking, and therefore we will always want to expand regionally. Nothing in this currently prevents that any at all. And therefore, again, we want to assure you that those considerations are always on the top of the agenda with what we do to ensure that the SEZ, as we build it out in Jamaica, will be beneficial for Jamaicans, will prevent the issue of profit shifting, and will ensure that Jamaica conforms to international standards how we operate here. So, Madam Speaker, those are my comments, and I now ask that I ask for the bill to be read a second time.
The question is, members, that the bill be read a second time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Special Economic Zones Act, read a second time.
Members, the House will now resolve into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Members, I put clause 1. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 2. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 3. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. And I put clause 5. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title. I put clause 4. I did. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I now put the title and the enacting clause. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Members, the question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with no amendments. Those in favour? Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Madam.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Special Economic Zones Act, read a third time, be passed.
Madam Speaker, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House adjourns until Tuesday, October 4 at 2 p.m. when we will continue the constituency, state of the constituency debate. And our speakers next week will be Member of Parliament Anthony Hilton, West St. Andrew, and MP Carencia Morrison, St. Catherine Northeast. MP Philip Paulwell, Kingston Eastern, and MP Crystal Lee, St. Anne Northwest. So, Madam Speaker, I now ask for the House to be adjourned till October 4th, 2022, promptly 2 p.m. We're asking the members to be here.
Members, a question before the House is that this House do adjourn until next week, Tuesday, the 4th of October at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.